Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Explainer. Today, we are unpacking what's essentially a massive tug-of-war happening across society right now. We're going to look at this fascinating clash between frontier AI capabilities, the physical reality of our macroeconomic system, and the very mechanics of how we secure our elections. It's a lot, but it all connects. Let's get right into it.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the battle for AI control, move into open source versus closed systems, discuss taxing AI's wealth, look at some sizzling inflation data, and wrap up with the LA election debate.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the battle for AI control, looking at guardrails versus capabilities.
Imagine you finally get your hands on Anthropic's new Fable 5 model. It is literally crushing virtually every single performance benchmark out there. I mean, it represents this incredible leap in advanced logic and reasoning. But, get this, there's a huge catch. To use this vastly superior tool, you're subjected to some pretty intense surveillance, starting with a mandatory 30-day retention of all your prompts, and it gets wilder. If the system thinks you're an AI researcher, say you're studying chip design or machine learning, or trying to build a competing model, it might silently nerf or degrade your output without ever giving you a heads up. So you get the ultimate capability, but you kind of lose your autonomy in the process.
And man, this dynamic brings us to a massive debate over intent. Critics are calling this a sophisticated, regulatory capture campaign based on fear-mongering. It really forces us to ask a tough question. Are these major tech giants genuinely trying to protect the public from rogue, dangerous AI? Or are they heavily hyping up the danger so the government steps in, builds this insurmountable regulatory moat, and pulls the ladder up so no new startups can possibly compete? Because, if you establish a federal AI agency that only the multi-trillion-dollar players can afford to comply with, well, you've effectively locked down the entire market.
Which brings us right into Section 2, open source versus closed. Is it the antidote to monopoly? Because of these really strict corporate guardrails locking things down, developers are naturally asking, is open source the only antidote we have left? Think about legitimate, everyday businesses doing vital research in plant breeding or biology or genomics. Suddenly they find their daily tools completely locked down just because a closed AI model tripped over some ambiguous bioweapon safety wire. When one single corporation gets to decide what constitutes dangerous science, innovation just grinds to a halt. Completely open-source models could fix the censorship problem instantly, giving unfiltered access back to the researchers who need it the most.
But, well, there's a giant elephant in the room, the financial hurdle. Right now, US open-source models are actually lagging behind Chinese alternatives. And why is that? Because the cost of entry is just staggering. To build the infrastructure for truly independent AI, you need immense power. We are talking about a single gigawatt of compute power now costing around $100 billion. Let that number sink in for a second. $100 billion. Open source is an amazing ideal, but when the price tag looks like the GDP of a small country, startups simply cannot afford to compete with the established tech giants.
Moving right along to Section 3, taxing AI's wealth. Is it a public resource or private property?
This astronomical wealth being generated has sparked some massive socioeconomic anxiety. I mean, if a few companies control tools worth trillions, what happens to everyone else? Senator Bernie Sanders actually published a highly debated op-ed recently, arguing that the foundation of AI is essentially our collective human intelligence, our books, our articles, our internet posts. And he argues this was essentially scraped and taken by the world's wealthiest people. Because these models were trained on public data, he says the public is owed a massive equity stake. His proposed solution? A one-time 50% tax on the stock of major AI companies to fund an American AI sovereign wealth fund.
Now, instead of outright confiscation, a market-based alternative is also gaining serious traction. Take a look at the right side of this comparison. What if we allowed the Social Security Trust Fund, which, by the way, currently holds about $4 trillion in Treasury debt, to actively invest in AI equities? Instead of forcibly seizing private assets through a 50% tax, this approach would modernize our existing safety net. It leans on the free market to generate returns, essentially turning every citizen into an active shareholder in the AI revolution, but without disrupting the very companies driving the innovation.
Okay, let's pivot away from tech for a minute and jump into Section 4, sizzling inflation data and macroeconomic pressures.
Because while we're busy theorizing about the future of artificial intelligence, the physical economy is running incredibly hot right now. The May Consumer Price Index just hit 4.2% year over year. That is the highest we've seen since April 2023. And look, this isn't just some distant economic metric on a spreadsheet. This is the direct tangible pain we are all feeling at the grocery store, at the gas pump, and in our rent checks every single month.
And compounding that pressure, the producer price index, that surged to 6.5%, its highest level since late 2022. This is absolutely a vital leading indicator, because think about it, when it costs manufacturers more to produce their goods, those price hikes don't just magically disappear, they inevitably roll right downstream, squeezing consumers even further when they finally get to the checkout line.
So what is actually driving this? Well, it's kind of a combustible mix. We've got structural government deficit spending meeting geopolitical energy shocks, specifically market jitters from the Iran war pushing energy prices higher. Now, interestingly, sluggish energy demand from China is acting as a sort of temporary global buffer right now. It's soaking up some of that pressure and keeping global oil from skyrocketing completely. But be warned, if the Chinese economy wakes up and global demand shifts, those energy prices could multiply rapidly. It would be like pouring gasoline on an already sizzling inflation fire.
Finally, let's bring it down to the local level with Section 5, the LA election debate, looking at access versus security.
Take a look at these numbers from the Los Angeles mayoral primary. The statistical variance here is just stark. You've got Spencer Pratt dominating the in-person voting at 35%, but notice that bottom row. In the post-election mail-in ballots, his support completely plummets down to just 19%. Meanwhile, candidates like Nithya Raman see a near-vertical surge to 37% in those exact same late-arriving batches. It is a massive, sudden flip that depends entirely on when and how the ballot was actually cast.
To really figure out these statistical anomalies, you kind of have to look at the structural timeline of California's voting rules. In 2018, ballot harvesting was legalized. Then, in 2020, universal mail-in ballots were implemented. And more recently, voter ID and signature match requirements were relaxed. And this sequence of events sparks a really fierce debate. One side argues these measures are functioning exactly as designed to maximize democratic access and ensure the highest possible turnout. But critics argue that they've inadvertently removed the crucial chain of custody required to protect the system, opening the door to systemic vulnerabilities.
And really, that brings us to the ultimate question tying all of this together today. From the algorithms running our tech monopolies, to the monetary policies supposedly safeguarding our wealth, to the very ballots deciding our local mayors, as our systems grow more and more complex, where exactly should society draw the line between unrestricted access and structural security? It truly is the defining tug of war of our time. So keep questioning the systems around you, and I will see you in the next explainer.